This is my director's commentary for my A2 Media Studies trailer, Forgotten. I'm going to show you the first 30 seconds of the video and then analyse it in a bit more detail.
Every breath you take, every move you make, every bond you break, every step you take, I'll be watching you. Every single day.
So, first 30 seconds over, and this is the first screen you see as my trailer begins to play, which is the green trailer card, and I decided to add it in as this is a convention of every trailer, which I decided to follow, as it made it look more professional. We then go on to the Universal logo, which, although isn't mine, I decided to add it as I looked into distributors, and this was the most likely to add to distribute my trailer, and I decided also it made my trailer look a lot more professional and give it more credibility. We then go on to my logo, which I made the image in InDesign and then layered an animation over the top in After Effects, which I think adds to the tension and follows the conventions of a thriller. Then we have some church scenes, which, although aren't a convention of thrillers, they are a convention of horror, and I decided that I'd use these as I think that they make the trailer look a lot more creepy. Then there's this typewriter font, which I used as I decided it looked clean and clinical, as it's sometimes used in sort of doctor's notes in hospitals and stuff like that. So then I decided to use it as it was sort of a juxtaposition to everything else, as it was clean and clear cut and you could read it properly. The blurry effects that are used as transitions, I decided to use as I thought that it made her memories look as if they were all blurring together into one and she couldn't distinguish between them. Then there's a close-up of the main character's face, and I decided to use really dark makeup but warm colours otherwise, as it's sort of a juxtaposition between the fact that she thinks she's safe but she's suddenly realising that she's not. The rhetorical question really makes the audience start to question themselves and think what they would do, and it really includes them into the trailer, which I decided was a good idea. I didn't see any other trailers doing this when I researched them, but I decided to do it myself. The cold colours are used quite a lot in this, as I felt like it made her look quite isolated and alone. And the different angles on her face were then used to be really disconcerting for the viewer, as it made, and as the same with the close-ups, that was the same reason I did that. These images show quite a lot of isolation and desperation, as they are really lonely, and it makes her look like she's got no one to turn to and nowhere to go. She's completely out of her comfort zone, which again makes for a creepier trailer. Creepy Woods is more again of a convention of a horror, but I decided again to add it in as I thought that this would make the tension better. We then have a long shot of people walking down a street with an old film and black and white effect on it, which I thought emphasised the fact that she was having flashbacks and it wasn't actually happening in real time, and that these were all her memories. We then have a slightly wider shot of the main character, as we can now tell slightly more about her features and what she actually looks like, which gives the audience a better idea into who she is. Okay, now for the next 30 seconds of my trailer.
Every word you say, every game you play, every night you stay, I'll be watching you. Oh, can't you
After this, we then go on to a street scene, which has got warmer colours to give her some happy memories and to show that everything isn't all bad entirely. We then have another rhetorical question which has sort of a shaking effect on it, which I felt like showed that it's like her world falling down around her. And it's got the same typewriter font to show continuation throughout. We then have two really short images to bombard the viewer with images and make them feel like they can't register what these images are, and to show how she's feeling. We then have a playground which shows innocence, which is the juxtaposition to what she's feeling, and then a tracking shot following people down a street, and it's slightly jolty, and I wanted this as I felt like it showed them being stalked rather than a proper camera following them for a purpose. This is just someone following them as if she is actually being stalked. We then go back to the playground scene which shows people playing on swings, which could be a memory for her, but the audience doesn't really know, and it shows again innocence and how that's being taken away from her. I also sat on the swing and filmed as I felt like this was a really interesting shot, and it just gave some variety to this scene. I then filmed when I was on a train as I thought this looked really interesting, and this is a longer clip as I felt like the rest of the trailer was quite short with really short clips, and I decided to make this way more varied by adding these two quite long clips in between. We then have some really red colours in a concert, which again is probably a memory, and the red is really harsh, and I thought that showed danger, and I decided that was a really good thing to include. We then have a completely deserted train station which shows isolation and shows that how alone she actually is and how alone she's feeling, and it could also show the journey of her trying to find the person who's done this to her. We then have this shot which is looking through leaves and a bush towards a house, and this could show either her trying to find the person who's done this to her or the person that's done this to her stalking her again. Either way, I feel like this is a really creepy shot and really makes the audience worried for the character. This is a shot of a swinging on its own, and it is more of a convention of a horror film to have this in, but I decided to include it as it made it look a lot creepier and added to the tense situation that she's in, and shows her loss of innocence as there's no actual child sitting there. And again, a close-up of her face from a different angle, and her hair is covering most of her face to show that she's trying to hide, and then her wide eyes portray fear. Now for the final part of my trailer.
How my poor heart aches with every step you take, every breath you take, every move you make, every bond you break, every step you take, I'll be watching you. Every bond you break, every step you take, I'll be watching you.
The shaking of the text becomes more intense at this point, as so does the music, and it's the music starting to really build. So I decided to make the text move along with it. We also have another rhetorical question as this ties in with the rest of the trailer. After this, we have a point of view shot of someone running down a road, as I felt like this was really putting the audience in the protagonist's shoes and making them feel her fear and feel the fact that someone is chasing her. We then have some quick editing to make the viewer feel really uncomfortable, as the fact they can't actually figure out what one of the clips is. And I did this again to make them feel really disconcerted and to make them understand how the protagonist is feeling. All of this time the music is being really fast and has lots of drum beats, which I decided to try and edit some of the clips into meeting as the change, but then some don't, again, to make it really disconcerting. I feel like the editing on the drum beat really makes the tension build and adds to the entire feel of the trailer. After this goes quiet, the heartbeat kicks in, which I managed to take from the end of the song and then put in the middle of it using a sound editing software which I downloaded for free off the internet. This again really builds the tension, and the silence with only the heartbeat shows you how she's feeling and the fear that's in her. Within this part of the trailer, I decided to include quite a lot of conventions of a horror trailer. They had a lot of images that you would stereotypically see in a horror trailer rather than a thriller, as I felt like this really added to the tension, and the dark contrasting with the light creates a very disconcerting feel for the audience. I again for this part used the blurry transitions, as I felt like this really helped the audience realise how much her memories are blurring into one and how much she doesn't know which are which, and how they all seem to be the same thing and she can't distinguish between them. Then after a quick cut to black, there's a shot of a telephone box which is deserted and is quite unsettling as it's very isolated. At this point the music is back on and there are quotes from film critics and film websites, and the use of these is a convention of film trailers, and as I didn't have cast names in there, I decided to add quotes instead. I then included some clips between the two quotes, as I didn't want them to be one after each other in succession, as I felt like that was going to be too much reading for my audience, as it's aimed more towards teenagers than older people. I used a distorted effect on this piece of text, as I decided it showed the way her brain was being distorted by whoever was changing her memories. There's then a quick succession of about 10 or 12 clips, as I felt like this was going to keep the tension right to the end of the trailer and was going to keep the audience interested to know when it's in cinemas. After this it then cuts to black, but the music's still playing, as I felt like this was a bad place to cut the music off, and also the music just keeps the tension going slightly and keeps the suspense right to the very end.